Hi there, and you're watching Dukascopy TV. I'm Durham McDermott. I have Michael Hopkins in the studio, and he is the CEO and founder of CSR and Finance Institute. Now, Michael believes that business can be the solution to development. Michael, welcome to the studio. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
So, Michael, you have done a lot of work with the United Nations. Now, how has working with the United Nations put you on this path to corporate social responsibility? And can you tell me the importance of corporate social responsibility?
When I left the UN, my first job actually was with The Economist.
Okay.
And I did a special report on Tunisia. Then I got hired by the UN, couldn't get away from them, in New York to work on the UNDP Human Development Report, which I did for 4 or 5 years. It's got quite well known right now in terms of looking at development, not in terms of solely economic phenomena, but also social, education, and the rest of it, health and so on. I came up with something called the Human Development Index, which I like very much. But one day, about the mid-90s, walking away from the UN down 42nd Street, I'm sure you know it well.
I've been there.
I thought, well, the UN's wonderful. I mean, you've got lovely people, they're doing some very interesting work, but what's their impact? You know, what have they really done? Do countries really develop based on the UN? Not really. And we've heard that the UN is just a talking shop. Well, actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Let it stay as a talking shop. Great, you've got 200 countries talking to each other. What's wrong with that? So talking shop, fine, so it shouldn't be criticized for that. So as I was walking away, I thought, well, that's the UN, doing very interesting work. NGOs, not a great fanatic of NGOs. So I thought, well, that leaves the private sector. Let's have a look. So my first idea was to rank corporations from 1 to 500, very much like the Human Development Index.
Okay.
And to make a ranking from number 1 to number 500. And I started that journey, which led me into this whole area of corporate social responsibility. And I started wondering what that was all about. So on that path, to try and learn what corporations were doing, I started working with them, advising with them. I had actually worked once in my life with IBM a long time ago. So I thought, well, let's find out what they're doing. So I started off trying to get data to rank them, but I found very few corporations knew anything about corporate social responsibility, even though American academics had been writing and thinking about it for 25, 30 years before that. So I started working on that, and I found that there was very little data. So and then we started looking at one country, which happened to be my country, UK, and a friend of mine at York University lent me his research assistant. That led to my first book called The Planetary Bargain.
Okay. Thank you. And when I look back at some of your videos in terms of corporate social responsibility and your campaign for this, back in 2008, now you seem to be quite an advocate of Barack Obama. You wanted to see him being elected, and he was elected and even got a second chance and was re-elected. But back in 2008 in your videos, you have said that you had great hope and faith in Barack Obama, that he'd change the world of corporate social responsibility. Now, has he done that, or are you quite disappointed?
As you know, in life, nothing is black and white. Exactly. Nothing is yes and no.
Yes.
Certainly, we went to the US to work with the Obama camp. What I did with that when I was in the US, I worked for something called the US Chamber of Commerce and tried to get them onto a path of social responsibility. They actually have a group called Corporate Citizenship, and I managed to train a few staff on these areas in order to reach out to American companies. In terms of Obama, yeah, we had tremendous hopes for him. And this is very controversial. Mm-hmm. I actually think he's done a great job.
Well, everybody has their opinion, and
Yeah.
So why do you think he's done a good job?
I think it's been incredibly tough for him, and we see that today with the big financial crisis in the US. He's inherited one crisis after another.
He has.
He's had a very, very hostile Congress right from day one. Now, you might say that Bill Clinton would have handled them better, or Lyndon B. Johnson would have been better. I think this Congress is one of the most hostile we've ever seen. And they've been incredibly hostile against the deficit. Now, I'm sympathetic with that in a sense. But the issue is, where do you put government and the private sector in economies today? The thing is, after the fall of the Berlin Wall in early 90s, that led to kind of, in a sense, capitalism won, socialism nil, right? So this is why we needed some idea of corporate social responsibility. We'd given the floor to corporations and the private sector. What could we expect back in return? And I think that dialogue continued through the Clinton years. And then we had that awful incident in the World Trade Center, which led to the Bush's war on terror, which really went all over the place. And then Barack Obama comes in the teeth of a huge recession with banks failing and all sorts of things, and a lot of irresponsibility there.
And just on the topic of Obama, the US and everything, what are your thoughts on the shutdown we're seeing at the moment?
I think we could be in trouble. We have until October the 17th. I think actually we'll draw back from the brink on that. I don't think that even the Tea Party can bring down the US on that, because there'll be a huge run on the dollar, a huge run on the stock market. Confidence in the United States would plummet, and I'm sure the Tea Party people, radicals, don't want that. So anyway, if you're an investor, good time to buy the dollar.
And Michael, wrapping things up before I let you go, now why are companies interested in government policy? What is the importance of it?
As we were talking about earlier, one of the big issues is how big should the state be these days? And in fact, the whole discussion we're having in EU and so on is kind of where to put the pointer between public and private. And that debate is healthy, but it's not put like that. It's always put in, government's too big, we've got to reduce it. Now, in a recession, which we've had, it's crazy to reduce government expenditure. John Maynard Keynes, who's now being quoted again, was right about that. And it's not good for companies. They know that, because as unemployment goes up, who's going to spend and buy their products? They're not. So what's happened in the US and elsewhere is that companies are sitting on big cash mountains and they can't spend it because you can't invest if people are not buying. So companies are very, very interested in what government's doing to something about the recession. And this current crisis in the United States on deficit, it so happened that yesterday 250 companies wrote a letter to Congress saying, we're incredibly worried about this deficit, you must raise it. So 250 companies getting involved in that. Also, half a dozen companies, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, met with Obama yesterday, same issue. They're very, very worried. If the deficit is not raised, and it seems almost rather silly, then the US will default on its debts and there'll be huge runs on the market. Let me just finish on this whole thing about deficits. When you and I buy a house, maybe you're far too young to have bought a house, but we borrow money, right? And they ask us, how much income have you got? And we're allowed to borrow up to 3 times our income. Well, the deficit of the United States is not even 1 times their income. What are we talking about? They've really got to spend, of course, as long as they perform, as long as they pay off their deficit, there's not an issue. Markets will be okay, looking right into the future. The minute you default, if I default on my mortgage payments, I take my house. Who's going to take back the United States? Companies are dead worried about that.
Michael, on that, we will finish up. Thank you very much. Really a pleasure having you in the studio, and I hope to have you in the studio again soon.
Sounds great. Good luck.
Thank you. Well, that is all for right now, but I will be back tomorrow as I will be bringing in Francois Ushk from Heritage Bank to have a look at Italian equities. But for now, goodbye.